Welcome to another episode of ROL Radio. Today we have second degree black belt under Carlson Gracie Jr., Rudy Jimenez. Rudy began his martial arts training in the early 1990s. In 1996, he began training under the legendary Carlson Gracie Sr., and that's when he fell in love with Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Rudy tells some funny and amazing stories about his early training and competing and what those days were like with Carlson Sr. as his coach, and how he became not only Carlson's student, but eventually his friend. Rudy discusses what he admired most about Carlson Sr. and what he believes Carlson's biggest impact on BJJ is. Here's another episode of ROL Radio with first place finisher in the 2004 and 2005 Pan Ams, Rudy Jimenez.
Welcome to ROL Radio.
And we are live. Gary, how are you?
I'm great. Happy Father's Day. We're doing this on Father's Day, so I want to extend a happy Father's Day to you.
Yeah.
And
great to hang out with you guys. And we have a special guest in the house today.
Very special.
Yeah. And I think what makes it special here is that Rudy not only has a lot of stories and experience on the mat, but also he's one of the few individuals who I think spend a lot of time with Grandmaster Carlson Gracie Sr. So we'll dig into some of that. Rudy, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I am good. Thank you. Happy Father's Day to everybody.
Thank you. Same back to you.
It's a pleasure being on the show today. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, how are you hanging in there? How are things going? Unusual times, like we don't want to spend a lot of time talking about this, but it's important to check in, see how things are going for you, for your family, and obviously for your students and so on.
It's been hard, especially I think not for me. I'm in a different situation. A lot of black belts. I don't own my own gym, so I'm kind of at the mercy of whatever they want to do, especially with the UFC. And I'm very happy to be there. I'm very proud to represent them. Everything's going great there. So not in any way negative, but since it's a corporation, they're really following everything to the T, which you probably should. But nonetheless, they're just like a lot of things that I really can't even decide or don't have a lot of say in. So I'm just kind of waiting for them to open up and to be ready. So it's been a little different. I think initially I didn't think it was going to be this long. I think like everybody, a lot of people are learning and figuring this out as we went. So I'm anxious to get back out there, to teach, to train, to choke somebody, to get choked. So I can't wait. I don't know. I still haven't heard back what we're going to do. The thing with the UFC is that they also have the other fitness classes. So again, as opposed to people that have their own academies where they can start opening up, and I think June 25th, there's a lot of the schools in Illinois where you can start doing a lot of even more solo drills, or already have opened up and are doing a lot of that solo activity. Here they have the other classes. So I think what they're going to hold off, and I think we're going to probably start jiu-jitsu a little bit later, maybe July some point, maybe even August. So right now we're just going to wait. In the meantime, if anything else, the good thing is I'm part of the Carlson Gracie team, so we have schools in other nearby states that I can go and train at. I've made a lot of friends, a lot of great people in the jiu-jitsu community that have opened up their schools, so I'll be training over with them as well.
Yeah, and you've mentioned just a moment ago that you're part of Carlson Gracie team, and I think it's one of the old school. One of the old school teams, I think, and I had the privilege in the very beginning of my journey to interact with you, meet you as I think you were a blue belt. I don't remember.
Yeah,
This was early on, yeah. And talk about that a little bit. How things were way back in '96 when do you remember your first day?
Yes, I do. I remember my first day in 1996. It was summer. And my first day, we were a Carlson team. I went to train downtown. At the time, we were at 820 North. I still remember the address, 820 North Orleans. I think it was a World's Gym. I think it was at the time. And it was my first day. They threw me in. I already had a gi because I had been training I started my martial arts with some Hapkido and a couple other things, and I think I had a judo gi for some reason, even though I never at that time trained judo. So I used it, and it was my first class, and they threw me in to spar, and it was interesting. I sparred. Back then, I've always been a big guy, but back then I was a little bit more in shape. I was more muscular. I used to lift a lot heavier, and before I ruined my shoulders and things. But so I was a lot more in shape, a lot stronger, and so they put me up. At the time, if you were a purple belt, you were like, wow. There was very few purple belts. There was one black belt, Carlson, in the whole Midwest probably. I think Carlson was the only, Junior was the only black belt. And I think at that time there wasn't even any brown belts. But then there was a handful. There was like Jeff Neal, Daniel Vienna, Pedro. Pedro wasn't even. I think rest in peace. Pedro wasn't even a purple belt yet. Paulo Vizera, who ended up dropping out a little bit. He stopped coming. He got married, had children, doing great. The business world. But he was my first sparring match, and I'm like 30 times bigger than him. But for some reason, I was always good at defense. So I didn't know what I was doing. This is my first class. All I knew is stuff I watched on the UFCs. I didn't know how to use a gi. I didn't know anything, but I knew how to defend. I would just hold his arms in the guard. Again, him being smaller, being a good guard player, he would hold me in the guard, he'd control me, but he couldn't sweep me. Because again, I weighed like probably 3 times what he did. And he couldn't submit me. And so the 5 minutes were up, and Daniel was just mad at him. Come on, let's go. And so he wanted him, he was cheering for his purple belt. And so the match ended, 5 minutes ended. And he said, all right, time, everybody, but you two keep going. So he wanted us to keep going. So we kept going. And finally, at about 8 minutes, again, it's my first sparring match ever. I first of all, I didn't know what I was doing at that point, and he ended up getting me with a collar choke. I was just exhausted, and I didn't spar again for the rest of the day. I was so tired, but it was fun, and I liked it. And I ended up training for a couple more months, and then I went away to finish my bachelor's. So during my first couple years, 96, 97, until I graduated 98, I only mainly trained in summertime.
So getting it in when you could.
Yes. We trained a little bit out in NIU, but it was so new. Not a lot of the caliber was not that great.
Who was teaching the class the very first time when you went there?
Daniel was.
What Daniel was?
Daniel Vienna, right.
At which point did you meet Junior or Senior?
So I met Junior. It was weird, actually. Again, when I was in NIU, they were going to open up a school out there in DeKalb. And so that's when I first met Junior. Was Jeff Neal came out there. They were looking at I think it was a karate school to open it up in there. And that's where I ended up meeting Junior for the very first time, because Jeff Neal I already had met. He's the one that signed me up, again, when I trained in Chicago during the summers. But that was the first time I met Junior, was when he came out there to DeKalb, and I met him there. It ended up not working out, so they never opened up a school out there, but Jeff still opened up his in Bloomingdale, which is still west. At that time, he was in Bloomingdale. It's kind of, Jeff's moved around. But when I could, I would make it out there with him as well.
Interesting. And go ahead, Gary.
I was just going to say, I really missed the boat. I used to work, I worked for 22 years, 3 blocks away from there, and never knew about it. Knew about it.
Jeff Neal or from
Carlson, from the first
one
academy.
in the city,
the one on Orleans, and okay. I never. I was taking Taekwondo way far north, and then after that, I did Kung Fu up like Rogers Park area, and just totally missed the boat. And I was in my early 20s. It would have been. I wouldn't be. Hopefully, I wouldn't still be a blue belt like I am now.
You'd be 4-stripe blue belt.
I'll take it.
Do you remember Senior used to say this? Jiu-jitsu, I'm a black belt. By English, 4-stripe white belt. You remember that?
It sounds like somebody I know.
Oh man, yeah, I forgot about that, and right now the way you said it just reminded me. Yeah, yeah, that's funny because I used to I had the pleasure. Um, I was able to translate a lot for him because he knew very good Spanish, and I speak Spanish. I'm fluent in Spanish, and so a lot of seminars or even classes, especially because he would come every Wednesday to teach a class with Jeff Neal in Naperville. And so a lot of those classes I would translate for him. So again, I was able to travel with him a little bit, picking him up, taking him home, going places with him. Not far. We didn't travel like far, but if he did a school, let's say in Indiana, sometimes hey Rudy, can you come with me? So sometimes I would go with him, but yeah, just even spending quality time with him like that, and learning more moves, learning more about techniques, because obviously if I was going to explain it and translate what he's saying, I had to really understand what he meant and what he was trying to get across. So that was definitely a lot of
And
things.
that's how I remember you. I remember you from these early days as kind of I don't know if the right hand is the right word here, but you always were with Senior. You were always helping him with travels. You definitely you translated a lot of things in classes. I remember that. When was the first time you've met Senior?
So the first time I met Senior was downtown. I think it was 2003. We're training because again, once I graduated from Northern in '98, I always lived in or near the city of Chicago, but my first few jobs in HR were out west in Glendale Heights. I worked out in even closer, but still north, Park Ridge. So during the week, instead of fighting traffic and trying to get downtown, I would train out with Jeff Neal during the week. Again, I followed him. He traveled. He moved to his school a couple times too. He was first in Bloomingdale. We were in his basement for a while. This was good times in his basement when he had a home in Warrenville. We were at a powerhouse gym in Naperville. He was a few different places. So I would train out there during the week with him. And then during the weekends, though, especially Saturdays, I would train in Chicago. And so one of those Saturdays, I just showed up. We're getting ready for Pan Ams. Again, this is '03. And I just showed up and he was there. And the moment I saw him, I was like, I know this. I know him from somewhere. I know him from somewhere. And then it was just like, yeah, he was there, fanboy. It was just like, wow. But very nice.
What was your first impression?
So he came up. The funny thing is, like I said, he was so down to earth. It's hard to describe him. Rest in peace. But Senior was just incredible person. He truly took an interest. When you were speaking to him, you felt like, God, only I exist. That's how you felt. Like he gave you all of his attention. I remember there was things that I shared with him. I'm like, I'm just a nobody. He probably don't forget. And if something came up later along that same subject, he would remember. He's like, oh yeah, you told me this. And it was just like, wow. I didn't think he'd remember, not because he had a bad memory, but just I'm sure he hears millions of stories from millions of people all over the world. And so he always made you feel like, yes, you're important. I don't care that you're just here checking out jiu-jitsu. I don't care that you're a black belt. He would treat everybody, make everybody feel special. And so he came up to me that time and he introduced himself. He welcomed me. I already had my gi because we used to, and this is when we were already at the Fitplex. I think it was called the Fitplex at the time.
Fitplex, yeah.
And so we would change. The locker room was on the first floor, and then we would come upstairs. So I was already my gi, so I came up. And I was a blue belt, and so he greeted me, and came up to me, greeted me, introduced himself, and yeah, the rest is history. So it was just incredible to meet him that day.
Did you know what you were surrounded by, the fact that this is, the magnitude of Carlson Gracie Sr. at that time? Now we are talking, this is what, 20 years back, right?
Right.
Literally 20 years, right? Did you realize the magnitude of what was going on at that point? Like who he was and the impact that he had and will have in the future?
You know what? At the time, I knew he was great, again because and again, you got to remember, back then there was no, or at least not a lot of the internet. The internet was just, so it was still in a state at a place and time where people you weren't Googling everything on your phone. You couldn't just pick up your phone if you want to figure something out in Google. We had the flip phones, I think, still, and all that.
Prime
So the
code.
internet was there, but again, not as prevalent. Again, today I'd probably Google like 3 times this morning, 3 different things that I wanted to look up. And so it wasn't like that back then. So yeah, I knew he was big. Again, I had seen him in the UFCs, coaching Vitor Belfort, coaching different people. I read about him. I knew he was big. At that point though, I still didn't know. Like it was until there where I really started finding out more about what he had accomplished, especially with those great Carlson teams that dominated all of Brazil and jiu-jitsu in the 70s and the 80s and even the 90s. So as I got to know him is when I started to really research and start looking at that more.
How do you develop this relationship with him? Because it again, that's how I remember you. You were always right by him. You were helping him a lot, which I think it was amazing, the amount of time that you guys spent together. But how do you develop this relationship? How is this starting and going through it? Walk us through this.
Again, I think it was pretty easy. Like I said, he's very laid back, so it wasn't like I had to talk to somebody that was way up here and I'm down here. He was very easy to talk to. Again,
Are you telling me this started just with a coffee? Do you remember Starbucks?
yes, Starbucks. We would go there after training a lot.
Starbuckies?
Starbucks. Starbucks. That's what he called it.
Starbucks. Well, it's
That's
because I don't know if you know this, but in Portuguese, I think a lot of, and I'm going to butcher this. I'm not going to. So if someone Portuguese is listening to this, probably going to correct me. But I know a lot of their words that end with certain consonants, I believe, have an e at the end. So I don't like Jeff Neal. He would instead of calling him Jeff or Jeff Rozovics, who's also a longtime Carlson black belt. Instead of calling them Jeff, they would call him Jeffy.
Jeffy. I remember that.
So Jeffy, Starbuckies, they would always end it because that comes from Portuguese, and so that's why they have trouble, or they don't understand. It just is easier for them, or the way they say it.
Okay. No problem. It's a second language.
Yeah, but again, he was just very down to earth. So as we talked, he made it easy again to talk to. We would talk about different things. I think one of the things that also what worked out well was one of those Saturday, I don't remember, it was the second or third Saturdays when finally Senior agreed to start teaching every Wednesday at Jeff's school. And I was there. Unfortunately, I couldn't come pick him up because I was working. So he would leave, he would take the train, the metro or whatever, and like at 2:00. And unfortunately, I was working, so I couldn't leave my job to go pick him up. But at least I was able to take him back home after class. So Jeff Neal, we talked about that one day there. He's like, oh, maybe Rudy, because Rudy drives back to the city, he can bring you. And so we started talking. I think that's where Carlson liked the idea. He's like, yeah, I'll pay you. I said, you don't need to pay me. It's an honor, and pick your brain, sit in the car with you and talk, jiu-jitsu or whatever, which is what we did. But yeah, so I would bring him home. And so from there, I think from the fact that that I was going to start bringing him home, we started talking more and we started developing that relationship. So it worked out.
What did you guys talk about?
Oh man, we talked about everything. Everything. What's funny is there was times where it was quiet and I was like, man, I got to think of, it's almost like when the instructor at a class or the instructor that's teaching a seminar says, all right, who has a question? And everybody, like, all of a sudden, you have a million questions, but all of a sudden your mind goes blank. And that's how I felt when there was like a pause. It's like there were so many things I wanted to ask them, but at the same time, I felt like I was on the spot and I just couldn't think of one thing to ask him. But for the most part, our conversation flowed really well. Again, we talked about everything from music. He loved music. I have like 5 of his. He never gave me a CD. I think later on he started giving CDs.
Yeah, Thomas and I were talking about that.
Yeah, he gave me the cassettes. I still have 5 of them. The boxes got ruined, unfortunately, and I had some water in the basement a few years ago, and the boxes got ruined. I just threw them away, but the tape still played. I tried them out.
That's
so I still
awesome.
have those.
I remember, it just hit me. I completely forgot about this, but obviously this is going decades back, but I got to the academy one day and he was sitting there by himself. I got early and he's sitting there by himself and he noticed me across the room, and he goes, "Come, come, 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 come." So he goes, "Sit, sit, 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 sit." So I sit right next to him.
That's exactly doing exactly.
I know, right? And so I sit down, and I'm like, "Oh, what is going on?" Like, you feel like at the principal's office, like,
Right.
what the hell is going on? And he starts talking, and he had a very good recollection of everything that kind of we encountered in the past and everything. And then he opens up his pouch. What do you call them?
The fanny pack?
The fanny pack.
Fanny pack.
Opens a fanny pack, and he pulls out a CD.
Oh man, I can't make fun of fanny packs anymore.
And he gives me that CD. And he goes, "Go, take it." And it's blank. There's no writing on it. And I'm thinking a blank CD. Like it never crosses my mind, And he gave me that CD. And then later I learned how big he was into music, and he made these CDs and cassettes custom.
Right.
And he gave them away, and like what a memory.
Yeah. So you're right. He would put on his favorite song, and it was like one song is like an Italian song, then the next song is like a jazz song. One song he even had, I think, in one of my cassettes, he had one of the earliest Destiny Childs. I mean, it was just all over the place. If he liked it, and that was awesome. So. But I remember the first time, the first cassette he gave me was because, again, when I used to drive him home, I had a cassette that I thought, oh, he's probably going to like this. It was Spanish music. Like, I forgot what it was, but it was, I think he's probably going to like this because he likes Spanish. He's got rhythm and all of that. So I'm thinking he's going to like it. And he's like, oh, no. This, excuse me, can I change? And I said, yeah. He said, this is no good. This is no good. Take it out. He puts in, and he's like, and then it was good. So I'm listening to it. We're jamming, we're talking, and at the end he's like, oh, I pulled it out to give it to him, and he's like, no, you can have it. And so he gave it to me, and so that was the first. Like I said, I don't know if it's 4 or 5 that he gave me, but there was quite a few that he gave me, and every time he would sing me, he's like, you finish listening to it? I'll give you a new one. So yeah.
You still have them?
Oh yeah, like I said, the boxes of the cassettes got ruined with water, so I just threw them out. But the actual cassettes still are there.
That's great. What a memory. See, Gary, I'm not gonna point anything out, but if you stop by at the academy, I'm just saying.
You're gonna give something away?
I'm just saying.
I don't think so. And I've heard the playlists here at the academy. You can keep your mixtapes. That's all right. I do fine on my own. I'm sure we'll get back to Carlson Sr. again, but you mentioned something that I was blown away by when Thomas told me. You said earlier that you think you met him when you were getting ready for Pan Ams in 2003. And it's my understanding that you haven't missed one since. Is that true?
No, that's unfortunately, my first one was in 2000 when I got my blue, because back in those days, there was no white belts competing in Pan Ams. You had to be a blue belt.
Okay.
So 2000, a bunch of us, well, some of them were already blue, but we had an incredible blue belt class. We had a who's who of, today's black belts that were blue belts that again, already either had theirs or got theirs, but Otto Clark, Jay Valco,
Mark Vivas,
Mark Vivas,
yep.
Tony Williams. So there was a bunch of
yep.
us. And so I'm telling you, those Saturday classes downtown were killer. They were just,
I can imagine.
I mean, it was just a who's who, and we would just go at it hard. So it was fun, especially because with Jeff Neal in Naperville, back then Jeff was sparring. So I would spar Jeff, and again, I was a big guy, Jeff's a big guy. So we gave each other competition, but outside of us, everybody else was like, I was still, like I said, a white belt before I got the blue belt in 2000. But everybody else was like a brand new white belt, and they were for the most part smaller guys. They're just really starting to learn. So no one gave us a whole lot of, no one really pushed us unless we sparred each other, Jeff Neal and I. And so coming out to the city on Saturdays was huge for me to get that push, to get that hard training in there, because it really helped. So we all, a bunch of us that got our blue belts in 2000 ended up we all went to the Pan Ams for the first time. And then I ended up going to the Pan Ams for 15 straight years. And then in 2015 is when I tore my pec muscle off the shoulder, off the bone,
Hmm.
so I had to have a surgery, and I just wasn't ready to go back. And unfortunately, since then, I've missed a couple more. Getting old is hard, but just accumulated a lot of
What
injuries.
kept you going back? That's how I always,
Beyond,
it's 15 years. I mean, 15 years nonstop, never missed. I mean,
yeah,
there are professional competitors that don't do that.
yeah. A couple things. One is I always viewed it as a vacation. It was always, I think the first
Wait,
couple.
wait a minute. Wait a minute. You said vacation? You paid for
You
the
know,
trip to California to get beat up.
Well, outside of that, it was fun. I love Chicago. I've lived Chicago all my life, but well, that's what I was going to say. The first couple, I didn't like 96, 97, 98. I think those Pan Ams were in Hawaii. But again, the first one I went to in 2000 was in Florida. It was in Kissimmee,
Yeah.
right outside Orlando. So those first couple were there, and then the first one in California in 2002 was in Santa Barbara. So that was 4 hours from, I think it's like 4 hours from LA, up north, and then the rest have been more in that LA area. I think.
Yeah, this was
Irvine.
when the federation was starting to get established in the U.S., right? Because
Right.
prior to that, all of the competitions, Pan Ams were in Brazil, in Rio, right? Then they start moving them to U.S., start exposing it up and growing the sport and the organization, right?
Yeah. So like I said, to me it was fun. The other thing you got to think about is that it's not like today where you have a Naga one weekend, you have a grappling games the next weekend, you have a grappling industry the next. Back then there was, and I don't remember when Naga started, but Naga didn't start till like the early 2000s. So in actual 2000, 2001, 2002, I don't think there was Naga yet, at least not here in Chicago.
But even then, I think Naga was Nogi only.
I think you're right. Yeah, the first couple
So
Nagas were only
because
no-
I remember as a blue, even as a purple belt, like we had to travel. Like
Mhm.
we had to travel to Ohio, to
Yeah,
Columbus,
yeah.
Ohio. There's nothing in Ohio, but there was a tournament in Ohio. Everybody was driving 6 hours to Ohio to get beat up.
Right.
But like going to Pan Ams, I remember was like it.
Mhm.
If you could afford it, if you could take time out of it, and honestly, like if you didn't go, you had no idea what Pan Ams was because
Yeah.
because first of all, internet was not there.
Exactly.
There was no YouTube. None
Right.
of that. Like you couldn't Google things. Like putting in perspective for the guys who are starting and guys and girls who are starting now. I mean, I say to my students, they are spoiled, spoiled. We didn't have any of that.
Right.
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 So you go into Pan Ams and you don't even know what Pan Ams really is. Like, what did it look like back then?
You're right. I mean, especially like I said, the first year I competed, 2002, almost even though it was in the state, again, it was in Kissimmee, Kissimmee Civic Center. I still remember that. Even though it was here, all the signs, all the sponsors, everyone talking on the microphone, so everything being said, well, everything was pretty much in Portuguese. So it was just, it felt weird. Almost all competitors were Portuguese, whether they lived already in the state, they were already here, but a lot of them traveled from Brazil. So it was in the States, but it almost felt like you stepped into the arena and you crossed something.
You're in a different country.
Time travel. Yeah, you went to Brazil. So my first match, I went up against this guy, and I was totally, like I said, spaced. It was just freaked out. I ended up losing my very first match, like 21-0. Because the guy started, like I said, I didn't feel right. I'm just hearing all this Portuguese and blah blah blah, and I'm not understanding. And this guy's Portuguese, and his coach is yelling to him. I think I passed his guard once, and the next thing you know, he recomposed. That was the only thing. But he started off with a big takedown. We landed, got the wind knocked out of me. Next thing you know, he's passing it was just horrible. But the next year I came back and I did a lot better. So again, it was just, I honestly got, it got in my head. I wasn't expecting that, and really got freaked out. But again, you learn from it, and then you come back and do better next time.
Yeah, it's great that you kept going.
Yeah, I wanna dip into that, Rudy, a little bit, because today, and we just talked about somebody else about this, but in today's, I get this question often. When should I start competing? And the following question after that is, Well, I'm not ready. I want to wait for blah 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 blah, and that could be I want to wait for a blue belt. I want to to get in shape. I want to get for my job to slow down. I want to wait for my schedule to be better. I want to wait for and I mean the list just keeps going. Okay, so now let's take this thought and put it in your scenario. You say that you go to Pan Ams. There was no other tournaments. You go to the international stage, the biggest, arguably the biggest tournament there is in jiu-jitsu, and your first match, well, let's be honest, doesn't go your way, 21-0.
Not at all. No.
And then you do this 15 times consecutively. You keep coming back.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you, man?
Like my mom says, every time I came to her injured or bruised, she said we're masochists. But yeah. Well, like I said, that was the first time, and I knew that after all that happened, I came out and I was disappointed. And Jeff Neal had a good conversation. Like, Rudy, just looked like you weren't ready. He's like, that's not the way you spar in class. That's not the way you train in class. He's like, what happened? And so we dissected it. We talked a little bit. Even Junior came over. So we had a chance to talk about things, and I said, you know what, I'm going to give this another try. So the next year I went, I ended up losing my first match, but it was 0-0, and I actually could have won. I didn't know about advantages and all that stuff yet. And at that time, I don't think they were graded totally as advantages, but it was just like more like, you know, who ended up on top and type thing. But there wasn't like true advantages like there is now. They weren't counted that way. At least I don't believe so. But it was a 0-0 match, and I basically lost an advantage like in the last couple seconds. It was a scramble, and I ended up falling back into my guard. If I would have pushed harder and went into his guard, I would have won. So again, it went for, and that guy ended up winning the championship. So I knew I did a lot better, you know, than the previous year. And then in 2002, I even did better than that. I didn't place, but the person that I won 2, and then I lost to Jeff Munson that year, who ended up tapping everybody out but me. And then the next
was a monster.
Yeah, he was super strong. I passed his guard. I think I lost like 8-2.
I did not know that you went against Jeff Munson.
Yeah. There's a picture I have of in a magazine at the time that took a picture of him and like my guard. I'm trying to get a sweep. So I still have that, but yeah, I passed his guard, and like I said, I was a big guy at the time, and he just like bench press. I mean, I literally went flying, you know, over him, and he just got up, and yeah, his takedowns, you knew what he was going to go for. And I think that in 2002, he had just fought for the for the UFC title belt like 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks.
Oh,
before
really?
that.
That was that. Yeah. That was that year.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so when I saw him, I said, I know this guy from somewhere. I know this guy. And so we're trying to make small talk. And you could tell that he's kind of nervous because he's probably expecting to win, right? But again, he had maybe some pressure on him, just given the fact that he probably didn't train a lot in a gi. Obviously, that could change things a little bit. So he looked like he had his game freeze on and he's focused. And I'm trying to make small talk. I'm like, I know this guy. I'm like, did I see? Because again, this is my 3rd Pan Am. So I'm like, maybe I saw this guy in another Pan Am or something, but I know this guy. And I asked him, I said, have you been doing this long? He's like, no. And again, he was trying probably not to talk to me, like, who's this guy bothering me while I'm trying to get in my zone here. But I said, hey, have you been doing this long? He's like, no, not at all. He just turned around. and it wasn't until after the match that someone's like, man, you did pretty good against that. You know, that guy just fought for the UFC title obviously this is an MMA, but nonetheless, you know, for someone to be on the big stage competing, and obviously he had done a whole lot in terms of the no-gi world. So he was a big name in general in the grappling world. So that's when I realized, I'm like, that's right, I saw him on the UFC. So it was him. Yep.
What a great story.
Yeah.
Oh man, I didn't even know that. Look at that. We learned something new.
Yeah.
So you traveled with Senior the entire time. I assume the Senior is there most of those travels.
So again, for those first 3 years, he wasn't. Again, it wasn't until 2003 when I met him. So 2000, 2001, 2002, I either had Jeff Neal or Junior in my corner. And it wasn't until 2003 where that was the one in Santa Barbara. And that's the one where Senior started coaching me ever since that day I met him that Saturday. He was working with me. Excuse me. And so when we got there, yeah, he coached me. There's a couple there was 8 of us in my bracket, and it was a tough bracket. I ended up taking second that year. And even the last match was 0-0, but they gave my opponent the victory. And he deserved it. He did a little bit more than I did. I was exhausted. I went up against a guy that made me look like a midget. I mean, this guy was just he was like 6'8", 400. I mean, Ryan Salisbury's a big guy. This guy probably was bigger than Ryan, and I mean, just tall. This guy had to be like 6'9", 6'10". Yeah, I have a picture of that too, where I look like I'm a little kid next to him. But I beat him first round, and that match got heated. So I got pictures where Carlson's telling me to calm down, calma. So yeah, it was great. It just felt great having him in your corner.
How was he as a coach on the side?
Oh, he was great. He was very, again, a lot of times when people coach, it's hard to hear as much as you try to listen, obviously depending on the arena and whatnot. But again, those arenas are big, typically in a Pan Am, in a bigger tournament. And so it's hard to hear normally, but his voice, I was able to pick his voice. Sometimes some people have voices that you can just, for some reason, you click with and you can hear them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was able to hear a lot of what he was telling me. And so, I just felt an extra, and that's no knock on anybody else that's ever coached me or anybody else. But with Senior there, I just felt like he was so vested in that I just felt like this extra boost of confidence that I couldn't win. And the 3 years that I couldn't lose, I should say. The 3 years that he coached me, I took second that year, and then in 04 and 05 I took first. So I have 2 Pan Am Masters Division gold medals, and I don't think it's by any coincidence that those are the 3 years where he was coaching me.
What I found always interesting with Senior, that he had a unique way, and I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on that, and if you had a similar experience. But for me, it was not that he pushed you hard, but he knew when to walk away from you or when to disconnect from you to piss you off, so you work even harder. And I'll tell you a story. It was one of the, I don't remember, it might have been Naga or something local, but and I'm a white belt, like 2 or 3 stripe white belt, 3-stripe white belt. And Carlson Sr. is sitting like 4 mats down. And you're right, his voice carries, because I remember I'm going, and I didn't even know he was watching me. I'm a white belt, I'm nobody. Nobody cares, right? So I'm going, and I'm opening the guy's guard, and I remember this like it was yesterday, and he catches a triangle now, and he locks it, right? And then I hear Carlson, "Bull, bull," and I know he's yelling at me, and he's like, "Whoa," and this through the whole arena. It's everybody's silent, and Carson's the only one yelling. And I was like, "Oh," so. And then obviously my ego bigger than my head, boom, I get out of the triangle, I pass the guard, I mount the guy, I finish with the choke, and Carlson comes up, casually, comes out, he shakes one, and good job, good job, good white belt, good job. Yeah. But I remember that match to this day. That was 20 years ago. Man.
He didn't make fun of you for getting caught in that triangle?
No, but just the fact that he yelled across the whole room got me so fired up.
I think that's the biggest thing with that I learned from him, and I think that applies to everything, right? Because again, I learned a lot, obviously, in jiu-jitsu, MMA, self-defense from him. But in terms of something that applies to all life, and something that I try to do, and I know I don't always do it, but he told me, he's like, because one time I asked him about it, I said, Carl, and he hated to be called Senior, but that's the way we separate him, right?
Yeah.
So when I was with him, I would never call him Senior because he didn't like that. But I would call him, Carlson. And so I said, Carlson, your passion is just, if I had what's the difference? What's one big difference between you and other coaches or other people? And it was his passion. And so one day we were talking about that on one of those rides home. And what I realized is that, anything that man did was with passion. I don't care if you invited him to go miniature golfing. if he said yes and he was going to do it, he was going to do it with passion and he was going to give it his all. And yeah, he's going to have fun, but he's trying to win and he's trying to do his best. And if you know, his philosophy was, if you're not going to be passionate about it, I don't care what it is. If you're not going to like it, if you're not going to enjoy it, you know, why do it? So it was like all or nothing. It's like, yeah, let's really do this, no matter what it was, or let's not. And so that's how, if I had to describe him in one word, it was passionate. So, you know, it doesn't surprise me any in terms of your story of saying how he was yelling and, you know, I'm not happy that you got caught in that triangle because you probably worked on that a million times, you know, teaching people. But again, it wasn't that he was mad at you. So I think Gary asked if, you know, was he yelling at you or whatnot. I don't think he was mad at you. He wouldn't yell at you or at least not like that. What I know, he would yell at you for things you missed, but not of things you got caught with. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you didn't do something you could have done, that's when he would yell at you. But not like if you were down, he wouldn't, you know, make you feel worse. That's what I'm saying is he knew how to work with that person. His personality was in him to try to help you and motivate you and make you better. But it makes sense that he was yelling like that because again, it was like his passion was coming. It wasn't that he was lashing out at you or trying to make you feel worse or whatnot. I think it was just his passion of, how'd you get caught there? Let's go. You know?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, there's endless amount of stories just similar to this when we were at the gym and he pushes you to the limit and then he comes up to you and says, good job.
Yeah.
Just patting you on the back and say, good job. Good
Yeah.
job. You know, do it again.
Yeah.
Go again.
So, you know, in that, that brings up a good story too. In 05 in the finals, again, Pan Ams, I went to compete and I took a friend of mine that year. She didn't know a lot about jiu-jitsu. So I'm telling, before we're going, I gave her a crash course on jiu-jitsu. I showed her tapes. I had the Gracie in action.
Oh, I have them.
Yeah.
I have them somewhere here.
So I was showing her everything so she could at least somewhat understand what was going to, you know, go on at this tournament. And so we get there, we're there. First good story of it was we went, because back then the Pan Ams was only like 3 days. They would fit everything in and they would end, I think the last matches would end like at 9, 10 o'clock and it would just cram everything into 3 days. So one day we got there and Senior was already sitting in the stands. And so as soon as he saw me come, he's like, Rudy, come here. So my friend and I, we went over and sat by him and I was explaining to her as we're walking there who he is and how big he is. And I don't think she totally understood. So we sat, and then after a few minutes though, he wanted to get an acai. So I'm like, yeah, let's go. So we started walking. We couldn't take like 3 steps before someone else asked for a picture, asked for an autograph, came and said hi. And finally, my friend turns to me and she said, you know what? He's like the Michael Jordan of jiu-jitsu. And I was like, yeah, that's it. But it was serious. We couldn't take, you know, it took us like, the stand was right there by where we were sitting. If nobody had stopped us, it probably would have took us like 2 minutes to get there. It ended up taking like half an hour.
And I think that was a cool thing about him. That
it was definitely.
He never said no to anybody.
Exactly. Like
I even remember in classes, like class ended and he was still there and he stayed half hour and an hour later and just chit-chatting and talking and showing you things. And it's just such a huge passion for life and obviously for jiu-jitsu.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so the other story from that year, the other good story was, so again, I'm in the final and I'm tired. And so this guy I'm going up, I think he's got a judo black belt, or not, he wasn't a black belt, but he was judo, trained judo. So I couldn't take him down. He couldn't take me down. And, you know, a lot of times, you know, neither of us wanted to pull guard. So we're just like in a stand up where I'm pushing him and we're doing all we can. And, bottom line, it was 0-0, right? And so my friend is filming. She's filming this match for me. And so she had to do something. Once the match ended, she stopped it, and she had to do something with I don't know what kind of recorder she had, but she was doing something with it, stopping it or rewinding it or doing something. And so it was 0-0, went to the judges, and they raised my hand. I won, got the gold medal. She didn't see that because she was doing whatever she was doing with her camera. And so I came off the mat, and again, I won. So again, I don't think senior, it wasn't like I was down, right? Because I just won. I won the Pan Ams, which was at the time, other than the world, and still probably other than the world, is one of the greatest gi tournaments there is, hardest ones. And so I come off the mat winning, and he's just ripping me a new, just yelling, "You should have done this. We went over this. What are you doing?" And so he's just yelling at me. And finally, after he gets done yelling at me for like a minute, telling me all these things I could have done, should have done, didn't listen to him, all these things, he taps me on the shoulder. He's like, "Good job." And so I turn around to my friend. I'm like, did you get all it? And she's like, "Yeah, I got all it." And she looks at me. She's like, "I'm sorry." And I said, What do you mean?" She's like, "You'll get them next year. Don't worry." I said, "I won." She's like, "You won?" She's like, "I didn't see you get your hand raised." And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, then why is he yelling at you like that?" I said, "Because he's passionate. He wanted me. He knew I could have done better, and he wanted. Even though I won, I should have won. I shouldn't have left in the referee's hand. I should have, been able to take this guy down or whatever. But I should have done more. He's saying I wasn't listening to him. He's my coach, so yeah. I'm like, he's like, "Wow, I thought you lost," based on his reaction. And so it was a pretty funny story there. That's how passionate he was, though.
Man, that's funny. That's funny. So listen, so things go through life. You go through this journey, and things are unfolding. And then unfortunately, Carlson passes away.
Yeah, it was rough. I actually, something that really hurts me to this day is that I wasn't there when that happened. So what happened is, again, and we're talking about a day and time before internet, a day and time before Facebook.
Yeah.
And so I had just had surgery. I was out. I was in training. I wasn't really in contact with anybody. I told everybody before, "Hey, I'm going to be out for probably a couple months. I'll be back, blah, blah, blah." So I had my surgery. I was out. And so when he passed away, it was when I was out. No one called me. No one told me. I think everybody was, and it wasn't nobody's fault. I think everybody was just in shock, disbelief, that I think a lot of people were just, yeah, that too. It came pretty fast. So because of everything, next thing you know, someone, by the time somebody called me, everything was, all the services, everything was already done. And so I wasn't there for the funeral. I wasn't there for anything. And so that's something that, I wish I would have been there for, to see him for a last time, and to be there with, some of my teammates at that point. But unfortunately, the way things happen, I wasn't there.
Do you think jiu-jitsu different as a community, not necessarily as a sport or as a techniques or none of that, but as a community, how do you think jiu-jitsu is different before and after his passing?
I think that after he passed, a lot of people, well, you also, technology again played a big role, started coming in more, especially as the years went by after his passing. I think they a lot of people really realized what a big impact he was, and it's very true. And I always say this to people. I said, I'm proud to wear Carlson, gear. I represent the team. I try to do the best that I can in that. But even if I was from a different school, all of us that practice jiu-jitsu, if your last name is not Gracie, you owe it to Carlson, because Carlson is the one that really took this to the people. If it wasn't for Senior, none of us right now would probably know jiu-jitsu, or at least not know it to the level that we know, because again, and I'm not trying to talk bad about it. I'm not trying to bring the jiu-jitsu politics into any of this. But again, there was a difference in philosophy and how Helio, rest in peace, also wanted to run the school versus how Carlson wanted to run the school and teach and whatnot. And so that's why they had that break. And so I think we all, owe what we know and what we learned, to Carlson, because he's the one that helped bring that out. At least in a, sooner. Maybe he at some point would have realized that, hey, we got to start teaching everybody or whatnot, or somebody else in the family would have, I also hear Rolls was very progressive like that. before his passing, so he rest in peace also. But again, Carlson did a lot to really get that going. So I think as time went by, more and more people learned more about that. Um, when people learn about his role, and after that, you see a lot of people still celebrating him to this day. People that, again, weren't on the team. Jacare has, wore his shirt, or, at least when he placed first, he had his shirt on the podium. Um, Jean de Ribeiro. So a lot of people have done that, and just to honor the man, because he's done a lot for the overall jiu-jitsu community. I think that's come out again with more YouTube, and again, as some of this technology has helped bring out some of those stories.
And obviously, recently he's been honored in Rio with the statue, right?
Yes.
And I know I had the privilege speaking with Junior about this, and I know he worked very, very hard to get that accomplished. This was not an easy task. There was a lot of red tape that he had to go through and get this accomplished. But the statue is there, and I understand it's just like literally around the corner from the academy. I don't know. Do you know exactly?
Yeah, it's right in the corner from where the academy, the original academy was, or still is, actually. But yeah, you're right. It took a long time. The first time I heard about that was probably like 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it started like 7 years ago, where I would saw something, I think it was on Facebook or somewhere, about donating to it, blah, blah, blah. I donated, back then. But then it seemed to like die out a little bit. For a couple of years, I didn't hear any more about it. I just thought, well, maybe they weren't able to get it going or whatever. And then you heard about it again, then it died out again. So yeah, I actually was thinking this is probably never going to happen. But again, as especially as those 10 year, after that 10-year anniversary came of his passing, it seemed like it really started to pick up momentum and steam, and they really made a big push for it. A lot of his black belts in Brazil, including Junior. So they all made that big push and able to get that through. So definitely going to have to come out there and see that. I've been to Brazil once in my life, lucky enough to come out there for a Carlson Gracie camp, which was a whole lot.
When was this?
This was in, I think it was 15, I think it was 15, 16, something like that.
So that's recent. I mean, that.
Yeah, that's
4 or 5 years ago. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. First and only time in Brazil, but we went up.
How was that?
Oh, that was fun. It was a camp that was one training session in the morning, one at night. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. Got to do a lot of sightseeing. My wife went with me, so I didn't stay like with the team. A lot of the teams so we didn't train at the actual Carlson school, and the original one there. We did get to see it, though. They were renovating it. They were doing some painting and things. So we did go in there and step in there, which was just amazing.
I bet that was emotional.
Oh, yeah. We took some awesome pictures there. So what we held in this camp was actually at one of his black belt Arigalo school. So we did the training there. And there where he has a school, it's also a hostel. So a lot of the students, a lot of the people that went actually stayed there. And then you train there, so it's a pretty good setup. But I went with my wife, so we just stayed at a hotel nearby, and so I hung out with her a little bit. We did some sightseeing, so it was a fun. I think it was like 8 days we were there.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
that's very cool.
Yeah,
I've never had the privilege to go to Brazil. It's on my bucket list.
Let's go.
One day we will.
Yeah.
Rudy, you and I, we're leaving Gary behind.
Oh man! All right, I'll try not to burn the academy down.
But on a serious note, I actually have a question for Gary. So Gary, you're sitting back, you're listening to these stories.
Yeah.
And what's your take on all of this? Because you are kind of the new generation of jiu-jitsu, right? I mean, Rudy started 96, over 20 years ago. Things were definitely different back then, not only from training perspective, not only the jiu-jitsu itself was different, has evolved over the last 20 years, but also culturally. It was very, very different. It was just arriving to US or just arrived to US. It was growing and so on, right? You're coming into the scene, much later.
Yeah.
Much later, right? With all the technology, all these other tools that you guys have. The academies are different, culturally is different. What's your take on all of this as you're listening to these stories from Rudy?
Well, I think, they're great stories. We'll start there. But I think that how much the culture has changed, right? In the 20 plus years. 2 years ago, we had an anniversary party here. Rudy was with us.
Yes.
Incredible amount of black belts, right? From all over Chicagoland. And Professor Phil Ducato, who is here at ROL Academy, took a moment to point out to everyone here how special it was to have all you guys with us that day, because even when he started, 10, 12 years prior, that never would have happened. We wouldn't have been lucky enough to have people come and share their knowledge with us, because it would have still been, oh, I can't do that. That's not my camp, or, that's a competing academy. And I think, what really is great, to put the technology aside, even if, you couldn't watch YouTube videos about it, or, order DVDs from, BJJ Fanatics, whatever. The fact that the community is opened up enough to where people will come to your academy for an anniversary, hang out all day with you and your students and your white belts, and share so much. I think that, that's the biggest takeaway. And I think it's because of people like Carlson Sr., who wanted to expand the community rather than keep it a secret, keep it underground. Let's show it. Let's take, you don't hear very often stories about the grandmaster seeing a white belt from across the room and saying, come on over here, listen to this. I made this for you. They either don't have time, or they've got, higher ranking belts that they need to work with, right? Things like that. And it just shows that his passion for it really made our community so much bigger, that now an old man like me can pick it up, minutes from his house. And I wish I didn't miss the boat in the early 90s when I was working on Chicago Avenue in Wells, and was instead going up to Rogers Park to bang on a Wing Chun dummy. I could have went just a couple blocks the other direction, and instead of sitting here as a host, maybe I could have been a guest. But just that passion and opening up the community for us is really what I'm taking away.
Rudy, so a couple decades later, you're in a position of leadership, not only in professional life, but also on the mats. You actively teach, you have your students. How do you pass on the knowledge, the wisdom that you got from Carlson Sr. in those car rides, listening to those tapes? How do you pass that on to your students?
And again, yeah, I think you bring up a good point in that question, is that there's, I think everyone's going to teach their technique in terms of what they know, what they like, all of that. So you're going to have your kind of your curriculum. But outside of that, you also try to teach your students other things, which is, again, a lot that I learned from Jeff Neal, from Senior, from Junior. A lot of these people helped me and taught me not only jujitsu, but taught me about life. So I learned a lot about them. And so I kind of try to do the same with my students. If I see somebody that's down, if I see somebody that's missing class, I think you also have to take a little bit, society's changed. Like I remember back then, if you missed classes, everybody was really, hey, why are you missing classes? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, of course, there was legitimate reasons, but it's different now. I don't feel like I can be that hard on people, so I try to, I ask them, hey, what's going on? You've missed some classes, or is everything okay? But again, I take more of that approach versus, hey, you got to make your class, or you're not going to learn, or you're just wasting your money, or blah blah, which is kind of the way the old school, thinking was in terms of how to talk to a student that's missing classes or doesn't come for a week here, a week there. So again, I try to do the best to lead them, to show them. I think also I've experienced things outside of just jujitsu. Being 48-year-old man, just in life, things that I try to pass down. So a lot of times, you look at your students more than just students, more than just a paying customer. You look at them as someone that you're pouring your heart and soul into. There's someone that you're trying to help, again, not only on the mats but off it. So when a student leaves, or when you leave a school, it's always going to be hard, because you build a bond with those individuals.
And I think that's what makes jiu-jitsu so complicated in a way,
Yeah.
that we do develop these relationships. And it's more than check in, check out. It's more than come in and break a sweat and leave. It's more than, bump it and go. That when these situations occur, especially as instructors, and I can't speak for you, Rudy, but I know for myself,
Mhm.
when students move, when they, for whatever reason, they have to leave or stop training,
Mhm.
it's so difficult. It's so difficult to, as an instructor, to, give them a bump and say, keep on going. That those departures are sometimes very, very challenging.
Yep, yep. And like I said, whether it's your students departing, or sometimes there's, I know my wife, when she first was learning about jujitsu, because again, she didn't know anything about it neither. One of the first questions she had for me, like, why is there so much drama in jujitsu?
Dude,
This
what are
black
you
belt,
talking about? There's no drama in jiu-jitsu.
this black belt broke away from that black belt. This group of guys broke away from their instructor. This team broke away from that team. And so, I would say that for the most part, with the very few exceptions, those are difficult. It's never, and I don't think it's rarely about ego. I think it's, again, it goes back, as at least in my case, I can tell you, that it hurts, and you feel like you give a lot to it, and losing students, or going to a different place to teach. You just feel like you're leaving some of that behind, and it's sad, in a sense. But again, there's always something new out there, something new to try, and more students to try to touch, in terms of their, jujitsu experience and their journey. So it's definitely humbling, to be able, the more people that you can reach out to, the more people that you can be a part of that for them, try to help them love jujitsu, try to help them feel that passion again, that junior feels, that senior felt, that, all these different instructors that have taught me, and that I respect and learn from, you try to pass some of that down to them.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. A story came to my mind as you were talking about, calling students and because they didn't show up. True story. Okay, happens one day. I'm sitting at home and my phone rings, and unknown number. I pick it up. Hello, and I don't think twice about it. Click. I hang up. 10 minutes later, a buddy of mine calls me. I was like, "You can't believe, you're not gonna believe this. Carlson just called me because I didn't show up to the class." And I was like, "Oh, damn, did I just hang up on Carlson?" True story. Yeah, but that's what he was known for. That he was known for calling students. Why are you not in class? What, you need to be here. What are you doing? Nothing is more important. Come in here right now. I'm waiting for you. I'm here. You should be here.
Oh yeah, he would definitely, he would call me, or he would at least ask me. Jeff Neal was another one that would call me. If I wasn't there, Jeff Neal would call me, hey, you're paying. And he was tough on me, but like I said, I loved it because I needed that at the time. I had just graduated from school, so there was a lot of things that would, I was still trying to figure out if, how serious I wanted to be in jiu-jitsu. When I was there, I was obviously trying to give it my all and learn, and whatnot. But you had girlfriend, you had this, you had that. Also, I like sports, so in the summer, I mean, we know here in the city we only get so much time to play basketball outdoors, or things like of that nature. So my brothers are calling me, no, come over and play some basketball. Come on, hang out with us. You never hang out with us. So there was times where I would miss class, and then I'd get the call from Jeff saying, hey, get over here. You're paying for, you're wasting your money. Get over here and learn. We miss you. And so, that definitely helped in getting me back on track, a couple times where I would start straying away.
Yeah. What amazing stories. What amazing stories. Gary, what are your thoughts on all this as we're wrapping this up, coming to the end soon? You're sitting back and listening today. What are your thoughts?
I want to hear more of them, right? So we're going to have a Rudy part 2.
Thank you.
For sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing everything with us. And, somebody asked me, what have we done? 6 of these now? We're just getting started. But somebody asked me, like, sum up the show in one sentence. And, we talk about the jiu-jitsu journey all the time, right? And we wanted to make this a show more about the people in it rather than the technique and the drilling and the competing and all that. And I just want to say thanks for sharing your journey. And I think that's probably my answer to that person's question too, is it's a show about the journey. And I appreciate you sharing so much with us today.
Oh, no, thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun. Tom reminded me and shared some good stories. A couple things he reminded me of, a couple things I just learned for the first time. And Gary, definitely great chatting with you as well and hearing your perspective on things. How long have you been training?
A little over 3 years, 3.5 years now. And I'm totally sucked in. I never leave this place. I might not be on the mat all the time, but I'm always here. And thanks for calling him Tom. Nobody calls him Tom. I think I might pick that up.
I thought you would miss it. Darn it.
No. So good. Thank you for that.
Rudy, if you could summarize your journey in one sentence, what would it be? What does jiu-jitsu mean to you?
Wow, that's hard. It means so much that it's so many different areas to touch on, but I would just say it's all about growth. And again, growth is not just in actual learning jiu-jitsu techniques, but building relationships with your teammates, building relationships with your coaches, instructors, professors, masters, and then building relationships with the overall community. Again, I've had the pleasure of being friends with you guys. I know I can go to Peoria and train with guys out there. I can go to Checkmat on Patty and Carlos's school. I can go a lot of different places, even if it's not a Carlson school, to go train for a day. Or like right now that, again, UFC is not open yet, I can go somewhere else and train because of the relationships and the nice people that are within this community. So I think jiu-jitsu is all about growth. And again, that doesn't mean just your martial arts and your jiu-jitsu and your techniques, but it's all about life.
Beautiful. Where can people find you?
Well, right now I'm teaching again at UFC Oak Lawn. Monday, well, it was Monday through Friday. Hopefully we keep that going. But right now it's still closed, so we'll hopefully be open in the next, 4 to 6 weeks. But the UFC gym, it's actually in Chicago Ridge, but I think the original location was in Oak Lawn, and that's why they kept UFC Oak Lawn. But it's on 101st in Harlem. So I'm there, again, 5 days a week in the evenings. And then Saturday and Sunday, I just float around, train. I've been taking Sundays off, but Saturdays, if I do train, I just float around to different schools.
Awesome. Social media? Are you on social media?
I am only on Facebook. Facebook's more than enough. Never even wanted to join Facebook, but people were like, "No, come on!" And I'm glad I did, because it's helped me reach other people in the community.
Peer pressure got to you.
Yeah, but again, for the most part, I try to keep it, for the most part, just jiu-jitsu, MMA, anything to do with martial arts. But yeah, I'm on Facebook under Rudy. You can find me there.
Awesome. Rudy, thanks for sharing the beautiful stories. Thanks for sharing the amazing journey of yours. We will see you around, and obviously stop by at ROL Academy anytime.
Please.
Always love to have you there. And I think we do need to at some point do Rudy too.
Rudy too.
I know there's so much more. We didn't even scratch the surface.
No, this was a lot of fun. I thank you both for having me. It's an honor.
Thank you.
All right, Rudy. Take care.
Take care, man. Peace. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to ROL Radio. Check out all future episodes on our website and all major podcast platforms. Take care.